So I don't have a gavel. Oh, I do have a gavel. All right, there we go. Okay, and because we, okay, so let's do things in the right sequence. Has everybody gotten the minutes? Have people been have a chance to look at them? Do you want a second, or their thoughts, or their things? Lisa, I think that your thing did it or did it not get corrected?
I don't know what thing are we talking about?
Attendance, right?
It did, is it correct?
Everything was corrected.
Except Lisa wasn't present.
Right, they printed the wrong one.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
Lisa mentioned and
I brought this to her, to
Did you have
Coco.
it revised when I printed
The last one.
No, I just have another draft, draft, and
Well, if it's the one on the table, Coco, then we're clear.
we're good,
If it
right?
says revised, the correct.
I see draft and draft, but
Yep, and it says excuse
The
Lisa.
one that just came recently.
excuse Lisa is great. That's all we wanted to make sure of. Is there anything else that anybody needs to attend to on the minutes? Otherwise, motion to approve. I got that. Am everybody in favor? I approve. We're good. Minutes are approved. Okay, so Greg is not here for water level reporting. So if Ken, if you have, rainfall.
Yeah, all I have
report,
is a
let's do
rainfall
that,
report, which I sent
and we'll
everybody.
defer.
Excuse me. Basically, we are months to date as of 27th, we were at 3.95 inches. We got 0.2 on a day later, by the way, just in case you want to know. But basically, year-to-date March was 11.48 inches. If you go down through the past 5 years, you'll see that we're pretty much on target when it comes to the amount of rainfall that we get by the end of March. So I said we're on target this year. Looks good. Keep it up. We'll be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, and it's been
Yeah, the
moist.
yearly rain numbers, it varies, okay? The average over time, in a lot of reports, is 45 inches. If you get certain numbers. I always use like 42, between 42 and 45 inches per year of rain. So when I look at that, that keeps pretty much what I consider to be an average year.
And the only other thing that, so do we have guests yet, Coco, or have anybody?
We do.
So let's just
Zoomers.
welcome our Zoomers.
And I'd like to follow up with the water report, and I had sent this
Absolutely.
to Greg Toner. We had been told in the West Neck Water District that it takes about 6 months for precipitation to percolate down into the wells
Depends on the depth.
and soil conditions and all that. I'm just wondering, is that still the norm?
So that actually is the reason I was turning to our guests, because we have Guy Foster here from the United States Geological Survey.
Okay.
Now, he's not in charge of the USGS real-time monitoring of the wells. But, and if Greg were here, I'd be saying, well, how are we doing with getting all of the real-time monitoring stations up and running and we had 4 or 5.
You are now.
We want 12 wells that we have real-time. And real-time means that we're going to be able to have data on how quickly percolation occurs.
Okay.
We're actually going to be able to confirm that kind of information. So again, Guy, hello. And if you could introduce yourself, who you have there?
Hi, yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good.
All right, great. Hi, my name is Guy Foster. I oversee all of our data collection networks here in New York. And this is Caitlin Cunningham, colleague who introduce herself real quick.
Hi, I'm a physical scientist. I work on some of the continuous water quality monitoring. I've worked somewhat with the Shelter Island site that you guys have by South Ferry. I think that about sums it up.
Right. So
And again, you guys are in on a later agenda item. But because we work so much in partnership with USGS, I kind of want to bring, and so this is going to come up like 5 times in this meeting. So I want to bring you in. So we do have real-time monitoring stations going up in the 12 water level wells that we've been monitoring for decades and decades now. on a monthly basis. So we now have that at real time or going in at real time. And so that's a transition that we're going through that we're very excited about because data modeling has become a very hot topic for us. And so, really welcome. And Caitlin, this is the first time we're getting, back and forth. So thank you for joining us. And we'll circle around as we go to the Island Center System modeling data and also, and finally, even most importantly, to the Menantic Creek discussion, part of the discussion. Okay. All right, so moving on from water level report, we have, Lisa, we're kind of moving that drug disposal
Right.
forward. So where are we at?
Well, this is the poster. And I hung it up, I ordered 12 of them. And I hung it up at Jack's, the two churches, not the Catholic, but Presbyterian church where there's a large senior presence during the meal times, St. Mary's, the pharmacy, the library, town hall, senior center at the dump, and they're still trying to figure out where to put it, and the two doctor's offices. So it's up to the committee if we want to make more. What I would like to do is moving in this direction, I'd like to find out from the people who are in charge of the blue boxes, if there's any appreciable difference between what they pick up now and what they will pick up after this campaign or this notification's going out, to see if it's even effective. So that's where we are with this. I did have some very interesting conversation with Laura Finelli at the senior center. And she told me a couple of people to get information to who clean out houses for the elderly when they pass away and all of their medications. Nobody knows necessarily what to do with it. So she told me to talk to them and also the funeral home.
Sadly, that's actually a part of the process here on Shelter Island is that we have elderly and
Oh, yeah,
life drug
where we
disposal
live.
is an issue.
Absolutely. And it's not just voluntary, but it's also the clean out. So what do people do when they clean out drugs? So that's where we are with that. And I'm interested to know what anybody's feedback is, if there's any other like PR stuff we can do. I did think about putting little placards, sort of with the same design at some of these locations for them to hand out to people, like to hospice workers, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just trying to think of ways that we can really get this information out. Home health care, great idea. So does that go through the senior center?
She can connect it, but no, they're typically independent. They're based on, I think, our
Can
report.
you go to the podium just to be recorded? Thank you so much.
Sure, I just, I can give you the phone number, but it's Shelter on Home Care. They've got a lot
Great, okay.
1,000 guys here on the islands that are helping out the elderly.
Uh-huh.
Shelter on Home Care.
Social worker.
Yeah, but no, they bring in workers and set them up for care, in
Right.
care. Yeah.
Just to record, Linda McCarthy.
Sorry.
Hey, Linda, thank you very
Oh,
much.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Want me to look up the number, the phone number?
Sure, while we're at it.
Sorry,
And do we want to spend the money to do this? Like, do we want to make little pick 'em up cards? That's something we have to decide. These cost $18 each.
I don't know, when I did business cards for election, hi BJ, it was, I don't know, $500 pieces for $20. It was so cheap.
I would love to get that contact.
Okay.
All right.
Shelter on Home Care is 631-333-2465.
I do a little poster pasting too, and I find that a lot of those large posters are hard to place in the summertime. And 8.5 by 11 guys, you can put like in the Islander, which you can't put that
Right.
anywhere in the Islander. That
Right.
bulletin board is jammed. That's the only other suggestion possibly. For
Yeah, making smaller posters, that's true.
Smaller posters.
These posters are pretty, I've had conversations with everybody where I put them to really emphasize the urgency of it, and I've had I had a great conversations everywhere. People are like, oh, this is so good. So maybe like an 11.5 by 17 or 11.5 by 8, as opposed to a 12 by.
The other thing is that Jim Reed does track poundage. When they pick up the boxes and stuff, they empty them out.
Right.
So they have a track record of I think, both locations, when they have a courier and basically come and take it away.
Yeah, I talked to the Blue Box people, so I just have to say,
That's what it is. That's where you get
we
to know.
want to get
Right.
the information.
Are you thinking about the reporter as a, were we
Like a
thinking
small
about
ad?
that, or?
They, if we want to pay for, they don't generally do anything except in the community
Uh-huh.
notes. You have to pay for the
It's
advertising.
expensive now, just kidding.
I don't know if that's something we want to think about. I think it's a great idea to be consistent.
Uh-huh.
So,
So again, I mean, I'm not, in general, the amounts of money that we spend, I mean, we should be paying attention because I think that all of us want to do a little bit more public relations outreach and spend a little bit more money if necessary on that.
yep,
So, and we also want to do more citizen science, which is possibly going to have, petty cash implications, nothing big. But we do want to, in fact, pay attention to reserving some.
maybe I could talk to Julie.
If we had the money, like, the time to do it would be at the beginning of the season when all the, when we get up.
And people, well, it's coming soon.
Yeah. When they're here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Memorial Day or 4th of July, probably not 4th of July so much because there's so many other things going on. Memorial Day might be a good time to target that. I know Julie Lane did a piece in the paper. So be good to get it in when we have a greater population.
And the other is various events that are going on around the island all the time, like we have Alliance things, as you know. We could put a poster over the scallop dinner, or rather at the Memorial Day picnic, things like that.
Okay.
And we'd be happy to.
Okay.
I mean, collectively, we've kind of got to get good at keep it simple, stupid. We can do publicity, we can do public outreach.
Yeah, I think-
Material posting, all of that kind of.
As many of us could,
Yes.
that can think about it and it would be best,
Yeah, well, again,
Okay.
I know, we have 75 people, things on your plate to do, but.
no, I mean, let's do this too.
Okay, so just before we move on,
Yeah.
do I have permission to, once BJ gives me that information, to make up small cards and then take them to the various places and circulate them?
How big would the, like, little calling card size?
I don't,
Like business card.
This is,
oh, that size, yeah.
that's pretty small.
It's Vistaprint, I just sent it to you. It comes.
Yeah, I'm thinking 5 by 7s,
Yeah, they probably have.
or 4 by 6.
How do you see that happen? What do you see doing with that?
Well, putting it at the senior center, taking it to places where, like, having the home health care people, giving it to them, because there's probably many of them. And so,
Or with the lunches, if they're home.
yeah. Yep. And
The
putting
only
it,
thing that was expensive was the thing we didn't pay for, which was the conceptualization and the artwork and like putting it together like that.
this is advertising,
And the rest of it is like, let's just do it. Like,
this is advertising for my son, who's developing a new graphics design business, so.
that's great. That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Do you need any graphics?
What's his name? Your son?
Adam Hassagen,
Adam.
yeah, Hassagen Designs,
Passing Designs. Okay. So anyway, advertisement over.
yes.
But is there anything more that we need on this particular?
We'll post it on the website too, like in like a month
Okay.
or so, we'll repost it. We'll try to post it like once a month or something, just so it stays fresh. I mean, not,
Community
Right,
organizations.
that's the thing about campaigns is you have to kind of persist at it over some time, yeah, and be consistent. Yeah,
One application might be online, Michelle Town Gazette.
Right, yep.
Like Silver Beach Association, for instance, would be a good place to send it to.
okay,
I thought about the
Would be a website.
homeowners organizations.
Or on our website, so
Yep, okay,
they have one, Hay Beach has one, there are quite a few. In fact, send it to Shuttle Island Association, and you hit everybody.
That's right.
Please post it.
yep.
Okay, so again, we're doing great. I want to kind of maintain a pace just because there's so much that's been happening lately. So we want to keep focused and we have guests. So I just want to just start this next section by like singing praises of Joe.
Well, I would support that. I'll second that.
I don't know if
Yeah.
any of you guys were, or if all of you were watching or paying attention to what Joe just did. Jerry called it dumbing it down, and I don't think that's what he did. I think that he just said, if you don't have any presuppositions about what people do or don't happen to know, and you're smart and you're paying attention, what do you need to hear? So that's my opinion about what it is that he did yesterday at yesterday's meeting to kind of clarify this information about the new studies that have been done in preparation for the environmental impact statement review, which will soon be released. And I just want to make sure that we are all clear about the underlying science of what Joe is presenting. I know we can start from we know more, we have more of the assumptions in place. But let me actually just start from I don't want to embarrass, but does anybody have anything that they don't get or understand about the studies that were just presented or feel like needed clarification?
I didn't attend them.
You didn't attend these last two meetings, but you did read the studies?
I've gone through some of the studies, but I also feel that a discussion of them makes one's understanding much richer.
I certainly think so too. And I didn't ask Joe, but I felt that the study by Tom Camemberi,
Yeah.
that hydrologist was, we didn't review that one in the public meetings, partly because that was that was the science, and that was the discussion of what was built on top of the USGS work on ModFlow. So actually, let's just even start there before I want to hand it off to Joe because he'll do it better than me. But do you guys all know what ModFlow is? The idea of it, basic. Does that? I think that probably does require a slight explanation.
Why don't we tap the USGS team
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, maybe they could give a quick.
I don't know if, I don't want to put them on the spot, but Guy or Caitlin, are you with us? Are you able to tune in?
Yeah, we are. I will say though that we're not part of the modeling division of our office.
That's like Chris Schubert's team, right?
Yeah.
Well, that would be Chris Masterson's team. Schubert.
Masterson?
Chris works in another part of the office now. I can try to get some of our modelers here on the call, but
No sweat. Yeah.
Don't let us
No
put
sweat.
you on the spot. The broad overview is that in 2021, the USGS released a model of the ModFlow model of the entirety of Suffolk County, of which Shelter Island was a part. That's actually reviewed in Tom's study, so that may be the place to take a look at it. If you want to throw that, I think it would be worth throwing that up on the screen. I have it. Do Coco, if I just go to Zoom and share, or maybe you can put it on the screen for us. Do you have?
What is it for?
It's the first of the two items that's on our, it's the Shelter Island Proposed Wastewater Treatment Plan Modeling Assessment by Sole Source Consulting.
Okay, yeah.
So why don't you put that on the screen for us? Now, this is not exactly the diagrams that we looked at in the meeting. This is the underlying science.
Yeah, this is the more academic presentation, I suppose. I guess that's relative. If you can get more academic than what we saw, originally. But
I will admit, I am not privy to understanding all of the technical information. I get the basic idea, but
Yeah.
it is pretty detailed.
So I'll just give a little context here we go. You got it up. Okay. So you got it up. Perfect. Tom was really tasked more broadly with understanding the hydrogeology and the hydrogeologic impact of what's being proposed. So his scope was brought in to look at what happens when you put this volume of water in the ground. Where does it go? What happens in the ground in your immediate vicinity? Do we cause what they call mounding? People were asking about moving one volume of water, from the center to say a few thousand feet away. Are we going to disrupt groundwater flow patterns in the area? Is there going to be any significant impact there? He was looking at what is the impact of the current activity. There are wells peppered around from the adjacent property owners, from Sylvester Manor, different kinds of wells, some low production domestic wells that are shallow, that feed houses, but also there's some very high volume irrigation wells on Sylvester Manor, so they have a different impact. So ultimately what Tom did was build a model with all of those pieces in. He was looking at moving the volume of water from one place to the other. He was looking at the impact of the wells in their current state, and he was also looking at where does the effluent discharge go after it's in the ground. Where is it going to head? Who is it going to impact? So if we broke those all apart, we saw that the wells had, I don't want to say unusual, but very specific pickup locations, the water that is being sourced from the suction, of that well. We saw the very specific patterns of groundwater flow of the effluent after it went into the ground, how it traveled across Sylvester Manor, even where in the aquifer the discharge would go. The aquifer is quite deep there, so we were able to see that it doesn't just stay at the top, but quite immediately goes towards the bottom where the saline barrier is.
So Coco, if you could just move along one or two more slides. So first of all, here we're looking at the area that was covered by the USGS model was all of Suffolk County. So you see that on the left. On the right, you're looking at Shelter Island itself, obviously, and you're looking at the contour lines, which are half-foot gradients. We just lost it visually. Coco, where to back up? There we are. So we have half-foot gradients going up to 6 foot high in the center of town. The lines are much thicker around the heights because the heights is much taller. So the gradients were steeper. So it's going to go up higher right at the heights. But in the center of town, and what's really kind of wild, if you look at that central circle right there in the center of town, some human being had enough intuition to go and plant the traffic circle right in the damn center of that. Somehow they could feel where the hydrological center of Shelter Island was.
Divining rods.
I was just gonna say that.
Divining rods, absolutely. That's the traffic circle right there at that in the middle of that center circle of the gradients. Coco, could you go to the next slide? So mod flow, and Joe is trying to avoid getting overly technical because his job is to communicate with everybody online who's going to hear this is not going to understand. But for all of you guys, we have 312 cells. They're about 50 feet square. That's the dimensions of the cells that we're talking about. They're stacked 5 layers thick, with each of them having 20-foot thickness. So if you think about that, you're going down to 100 feet to capture your aquifer zone, right? But you have a three-dimensional model of grids. Look how dense on the left. That is the model of actually the northern end of Shelter Island, I think. But in any case, we are now talking about, so the basic fundamentals of mod flow are, you say to yourself, given soil characteristics and the height of the water, from each cell, where will it flow to what other cell? How much water goes from any one cell in that three-dimensional grid to any other cell so that you can trace flow as it's going to go, Andrew?
What's the assumption about the uniformity of the soil?
So that's a primary characteristic in terms of the flow rate and also the direction. Yeah, so actually that's a good question for the USGS because I do know how they source the data for the elevations. How nitty gritty they get with the soil characteristics, I don't know. We're pretty lucky where most of the soil is consistent. Here there are patches where you have abnormalities, clay layers, things like that. But for the most part, it's safe to make relative,
Glacial.
conservative
So the
assumptions.
modeling assumption,
There are modeling assumptions that as you
Yeah.
study this document, you'll see that they're built in and stated.
the modeling assumption is that basically the soil characteristics are uniform, from cell to cell to cell.
That's a good question.
Porosity?
I have to check the assumptions here. I mean, the term that they're talking about is hydraulic conductivity. And so we'd have to see what number they used for that. Quite frankly, I'm not sure if it's an assumption that it's the same from everyone.
Some of the original
Perhaps.
studies that were done in the 70s, for instance, into boreholes, they basically took samples all the way down and they classified them. So my assumption would be that USGS knows about this data and they maybe have used it with regards to the velocities.
And again, that modeling was done throughout Long Island and stated with a fairly high degree of confidence. So we should be asking ourselves degree of soil character.
Hydraulic conductivity specified by USGS. They give a range for the soil characteristics of the area.
Of a given area. So the assumption should be that they're taking into account both soil characteristic and elevation.
Yes.
But it should be pursued and
Okay.
questioned. Okay? So given that, we're able to map both the intake plume and the outflow plume.
I would add though, since we're on the subject of hydraulic conductivity, that largely influences the travel time, not so much the travel direction. In this kind of model, you wouldn't be looking at, hitting a wall, rather a slower period of travel. So when we're having a discussion about flow paths, hydraulic conductivity perhaps is the secondary or tertiary variable.
It speaks to when something will hit.
Yeah.
Clay layers are intermittent all the way through the ground.
Yeah, right.
That would be the ones that would.
Okay, so with that basic science stuff down, I'm going to turn it back to Joe and go from this page onward to what it is that they found. And
Yeah. Go ahead, Coco. Can you advance? Oh, is it you that's controlling here?
Yes.
Oh, Coco, okay. Yeah, keep going. Keep going. Okay, let's go back up one more. Okay, so this is the Manwaring location. Breaking it apart, the red lines are the flow patterns from the discharge location to surface waters. In this case, we see a pretty distinct pattern emerge in the direction of Gardner's Creek. That's more or less what we understood to be the case. You'll see it's not a coincidence, though, that the flow pattern is more or less always perpendicular to the contour.
Right.
Water flows uphill to downhill, and that's the curvature that's being established. And the curve gets more precise as you increase the number of cells and how the fine tuning of the contour. So you can go, smaller and smaller and smaller, but ultimately you start to see the same curve develop. And so the red lines represent flow path of the discharge. It does not represent the relative concentration. So the darkness of the red has no indication of when the concentration is perhaps diluted. It just means any given particle will travel along those lines from where it starts to where it ends.
And it might be obvious to state, but those lines, the way they're drawn, make you think that somebody just sketched this. This is the computer rendering of these particle flow paths.
It looks so neat.
So
looks artsy.
it's not uncommon.
That water flows so neatly.
Yeah, so there's a couple distinct features about this area. You'll see that as you approach Gardner's Creek, the contours get closer and closer together. That means that the elevation is changing faster. So the slope that the water is falling downhill is getting steeper, which would ultimately accelerate your time through, but also narrows that path. So as we get closer to Gardner's Creek, we wouldn't expect the likelihood of a last minute turn becomes lower and lower. Your vulnerabilities are more enhanced when you have a bigger gap between the groundwater contours. And that plays out exactly at the top here because we're at the very top. So you could move a little bit in one direction and have a totally different outcome with your flow path by the time you get to the periphery of the island. Go ahead.
How deep are we talking here? What is at the very top, what is the depth of the flow? And does the depth alter the flow?
The other chart.
That it
It does. You're 3 slides ahead, Lisa.
Okay.
Slide ahead. In any case, so that's the red. Then the other graphics there, you'll see purple and green. All of those points represent the known wells at those precise locations. So we also have for each of those wells the installation characteristics, the depth, the pickup screen, the pumpage, and that tail that you see extending from each well point represents the pickup area of what water gets extracted through the well. So if you're looking at the bottom of the page closest to the discharge point on Manwaring, you'll see some tails are longer than others. Some are a little bit wider versus narrower, but generally they're quite narrow. And that has to do with how quickly the water is moving in that area. So if you can imagine, the water's kind of flowing to the well rather than the well sucking water back through the ground from behind it, which, if you stick with that concept of water flows downhill, as the well turns on and it's extracting water, the water that's going to be drawn to it first is the water that's slightly uphill falling towards it, rather than the well sucking back upward the water that's already downhill behind it. Escaping it. And it's right. So these initial images help us understand what conflicts do we need to dig into a little bit more. Is there any overlap? And what we can rule out, obviously, from just the two-dimensional plan view here is that most of those wells, there's no impact. You're far away. They're not even overlapping. So they're not in the same neighborhood. That's all of the domestic wells that we see from the Good Groundhog development to the right of the discharge site, also the private residence to the left. You'll see the pickup area for both of those is actually before the discharge point. Does that make sense? So the green lines, those are the irrigation wells. Those are what we consider high volume, high production. They extend deeper into the aquifer. So that's why they're color coded differently. But you'll see generally their tails are a bit longer as well. And that's indicative of the higher production that we see out of those particular points. Yet again, they're far off. Hundreds, if not, maybe 1,000 feet away from the flow path, and there's no overlap. Now, your eye's obviously drawn to the two purple wells that are, one is clearly in the flow, overlaps with the flow path, the other is quite close. And that's where the three-dimensional model comes into play. So, Coco, could we advance keep going? There we go. Back up one more. You know what? Forward one more. That one's the better one. Nope, the other way. The other forward.
Is it this
There we go.
one that we're looking at here?
Yeah. So here is where you're looking at the three-dimensional slice. This is the depth that you were talking about, Lisa. And the green lines you can see there are the ones that are the higher production wells. The purple ones are the shallower domestic production wells. If you're looking at the top graph, it's a little misleading because you'll see there's some blending of the purple and the red, but that's because you've taken a slice and you're sort of looking through the whole way. The bottom slice is the one that's most relevant to our discussion. That slice happens at the plane that we're talking about now. The slice on the top, if you can imagine, your red is here. Your purple is actually back there, but as you're looking at the slice, they're overlaid. So that's the misleading part that I'm talking about. It's the depth into and out of the page. So looking at the bottom slice, same issues with the red flow paths. You'll see the pattern for what happens to this discharge once it hits the ground is very clear. it more or less goes straight down to the bottom, stays along the bottom, and travels all the way along the bottom until it reaches the periphery of the island. And we are very much clear from any of these well activities in the area. So even the wells where we saw overlapping flow with pickup area, what we have, or what they classify this as overlapping, but they do not intersect. So one is going well under the other, and the well cannot access the water that's in that red flow path. So they don't interact. There's no conflict.
It's almost like a diffusion layer down that low. I mean, you're down there, it says, right? At 80 feet, 100 feet, basically, we're at that interface level between the upper glacial and basal.
Yeah, and you know, Ken, one thing that's relevant to this model that I didn't know the discharge, or I didn't expect the discharge to go down so quickly, right? So you think about this phenomenon in other parts of the island where the aquifer is very shallow.
Right.
And folks putting in wells don't have a lot of choice where, you know, you've got to go more or less as deep as you can go before you hit salt water. If this pattern holds true, that's like the worst. That's where everybody else's septic and the lowest part of the aquifer, as it's transitioning to salt water, tends to not be of very high quality. And actually, we know this a little bit from the West Neck system when we take our test holes and when the wells are not functioning or during a dry season, the quality begins to degrade as we get to the bottom.
Because I always envision.
And they're not even that deep.
And they're not that deep.
I always envision.
You're bumping along the bottom of the floor on which the stuff is concentrating.
28 feet?
Well, like a Silver
like
Beach
that.
area, for instance, I always pictured, because typically a septic is down 10 feet, right? Something like that. And a well down where we live is in that area is about 20, 25 feet.
Mhm.
If you go to 35, you're in salt.
Yeah.
So I always pictured this little flow from the septics being above all of this, going right out to the bays. I never thought that it would drop down
So
the interface layer.
I think we're both, so that's right as well. When you look at the flow patterns here, you see that they do linger. If you are in close proximity, so perhaps your neighbor's septic system or your own, it is lingering in the upper portions.
Well, like towards right at the beach where the interface layer is, it goes.
And then it comes back up,
Yeah.
right? So
So that's a.
All right, so there's about 1,000 lessons to learn.
Yeah.
Right, but I want to keep this moving along, so it's very important because we also have the Manatee folks with us to also look at the current
the
situation.
current, yes, okay, right. So let's get ahead. Okay, so the conclusion here is that with a very high degree of confidence, there is no interference, no negative interference on adjacent or even neighboring groundwater users. So that's a very positive finding. The travel time is still quite significant. I think it was about 30 years from the Manwaring location before it discharges to Gardner's Creek, but you know, it doesn't, right, it's not, there are no downstream users impacted, so that's the really positive takeaway. The other part of the model looked at the existing conditions. Oh, you know, there is a good, okay, could you, oh, shoot, did I, maybe I passed? Yeah, go ahead a little bit more. Might have passed it. Oh, too far. Just quickly, we'll see the, one, that one, yeah, stop right there. That's just the full spectrum. So you'll see, Ken, as we were talking about discharge location on the left, all the way along the bottom to Gardner's Creek, and then right back up again, right at the periphery.
Very dramatic.
Yep. Yeah, very dramatic, yeah. So the other part of the modeling looked at our existing conditions. So Coco, ahead, the other way. Yeah, right there, that's good. And by existing conditions, we were trying to understand who's impacted right now by the legacy arrangement. And the legacy arrangement would change in concentration if we examine individual systems, but the flow paths for individual systems at each parcel here or for traditional systems would stay the same. You know, the discharge location is at each individual parcel, presumably within a few feet of where they are now, but we would be swapping, you know, a cesspool or a septic system for some sort of, IA type treatment at that same location. So
Just help me out here. Where you see the second red line coming from the north, or the third line going along Shore Road there, that elevation is high in the heights. I don't understand how this works because,
Going very deeply.
I'll show you what I'm saying.
Groundwater elevation, not the land.
oh yeah, that's the ground. Yeah,
This
very
area
steep, that's very
is very, it's very elevated.
It should be much closer.
So, I mean, I don't know, is the hydrology such that the water would go, or the wastewater would go down and not follow that elevation? It would just go along one plane out?
That's what you're saying. It's going under the ground, way down deep.
what the contours the contours that you're seeing here, Lisa, are the groundwater elevations, which aren't relevant to the actual.
Oh, it's not
elevations.
contour, it's
Correct.
not elevation from a contour standpoint, right? It's
And that has no
It's
bearing on
only
it?
the groundwater elevation. Yeah, so that's, not necessarily reflective of the actual.
geological, it's not a geological
So-
elevation. That's
Right, so the topography has nothing to do with the groundwater elevation.
Well, that's not exactly the case, because if you have a very high elevation, it takes longer for water to percolate through, and there are impacts to the characteristics. But what you're seeing here are only the
The
groundwater
groundwater.
elevations. Yeah, exactly. And what drives this really is their distance to the periphery of the island. The further away from surface waters you are, the higher the groundwater elevation can get. Does that make sense? Because the water wants to,
Just say that
how
again.
the lens is created is by being away from surface waters.
Right,
Once the groundwater reaches the extents of the island, it's released.
right.
The further you are away, the fresh water, the groundwater can be more contained, and that's what's creating
That lens.
that lens.
I got you.
Hydraulic conductivity, that friction that's
It's the weight.
between the soil is what's allowing the water to pile up in the center.
Okay,
Not really relevant to how high the ground is, although, there are some implications. But that's why we see the highest elevation at the center. That's why we have that lens that we've discussed, where there's a slight curve to the aquifer. And that elevation is what's essential for keeping the salt water out. That head pushing fresh water out is the positive pressure
I got it.
that's needed.
It's curious to me, this makes sense to me, because the contours are fairly close together, so the gradient is steeper. It's curious to me that the points of origin, that wastewater from points of origin in here are also going that way, they're going that way instead.
It is.
What, does anyone know,
Say that again?
in other words,
He's talking about the split of the mountain.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, why is this split here? Because
Quite dramatic.
if I'm, these two sites aren't very far away from each other.
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Joe's analogy in the town hall meeting was of a ski slopes.
Yeah,
At the very top of the mountain, you have a couple of choices.
yeah, no, that's right, but it's still curious.
Yeah. And I've also
Because
noted
that's a
those
more-
lines.
That's not as steep a gradient as that. You would think that it would follow the steepest gradient. But
But you're at the top, and so on either side of the top of the mountain, it falls off in different directions.
Wasn't there at one time flows of water?
oh, is that just a minute, is that the answer?
Is what the
Top of
answer.
mountain, different
Is
directions.
this the answer?
Am I right in what I just said? Up different directions.
Yeah, exactly. And I certainly don't want to discredit the value of the model, but the location is such that if you were a couple of blocks away, you're likely going to go to Cockles Harbor.
Megan,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay.
You're on the other side. All right.
another
You're
point.
right at the bound.
And I'd also add that these groundwater elevations, they don't change dramatically, but they are not set in stone.
Correct.
Different conditions, drought, water usage, we get different rainfalls on some sides of the island versus others. In the heights, for instance, where you have a no recharge situation with your own water system, and you're talking about 50,000 gallons a day that's extracted that doesn't get returned. So there's a lot of nuances to what's happening in the aquifer that can play a role in this. Quite frankly, I don't think the height situation, because of its location, has much of an impact. But if the elevation in the center changes by just a little bit over the course of 5 years, it has a dramatic impact on
Where things
go.
And again, those red lines are a mathematical prediction of where the flow is going.
Particle flow. Yeah.
Particle flow is going. Given the elevations of the aquifer, the primary inputs are the elevations of the aquifer and the assumption that the porosity, or you use the word hydroconductivity, the porosity, the ability of the soil to have water flow through it is uniform.
And to be
uniform.
investigated how much uniformity versus soil characteristic is taken into account in this model. So let's investigate.
I have a point here, and it's something that Meg and I talked about a while back regarding flows in general, historic flows from the old Cheller Island days. And there was a time at this part of Menanti, the upper part of Menanti Creek, there was a flow of, I don't know if it was considered a swamp or what it was, or it was a wetland of sorts that basically tracked that path from the center. If I'm
Pushed up further, so it's slowly filled in over time. So like, it used to come up further into it. And if you look on GIS, where the two water paths separate, there's actually different watersheds. So there's a line separating the two watersheds from the one flow that goes to Menanti Creek and the other flow that goes out. It's actually
Mathematically before.
right. So on GIS, you can actually see where they would split off because the watersheds divide. It's actually kind of interesting.
You wind up seeing the ridge. But the point that I wanted to just make sure that we don't lose sight of is that this is passing through Satcham's Woods on its way out that way, where we are likely to want to source water. It's also passing the West Neck well.
And it's over 100 years.
And it goes across 100 years, that path.
Yeah.
And that's 20% of your water from these municipal buildings.
So do we have a vertical cross-section of those lines going?
Not in this presentation, I don't think. No. No, not in this presentation.
Okay, so but I want, because of how we're, okay, go ahead. Go for it, Andrew, question.
Okay. So this is a model, this is a prediction based on those assumptions. This would tell me that if we actually looked at aquifer water quality in this pathway, we should pick up.
Yes.
Yeah.
You should be able to confirm that.
Yeah,
Qualitatively, that's aligned with the data that I've seen.
that's my question.
Yeah.
More so than over here?
Fading over there, but it's elevated over there as well.
Well, and keep in mind that there are many, many more sources.
Right.
So there are going to be
Yeah,
additional
correct.
red lines
Not
from
just
every
here.
building right
Right.
over here,
Right.
going like that,
Right.
right? This
Yeah.
is just where mapping the area that we're able to engineer our work.
Right.
The highest nitrogen reading that I've seen on the island is just beyond the school in that direction,
In
in the
here,
flow path direction.
in the flow,
Yeah, so just a little bit advanced along the flow path.
like in here.
Yeah.
that was from the Cronin
Okay.
data,
Mm-hmm.
So,
That would be like
Recent than that, more
or even more.
going off Smith Street
School Street to Smith Street.
and going toward Menantic that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, heading for Commander Cody. Knock a line toward what Commander Cody's in your head.
And that's
Like that.
qualitative, data from this year, from a different year,
yeah, right.
overlaid, that generally fits.
I think that brings, just very quickly,
Go ahead.
I know,
Please.
huge though,
That was huge.
it brings to mind the importance of getting this on a regular, ongoing basis. This,
The modeling?
well, the quality of wells in the path of.
Yeah, the data, the
Yeah.
confirming data, absolutely.
Like continually.
Andrew, another important part of that flow path is the density of development in that neighborhood happens to be of the higher density throughout the island. So aside from the flow paths are, exactly, these flow paths represent only the impact from those particular systems.
Yeah, right.
But in addition to that area being influenced by what's happening here of the municipal buildings, there is a lot of influence simply because of how it's developed. So what I think an important takeaway from this is that area is probably the one suffering the most in general
Within that watershed.
and the area that should get the most attention in terms of remediation.
program. So in other words, would not be on, paid by the users or the town. The transmission main along North Midway and then the two east on Jasper and Thomas would be paid for locally. In other words, not by them. So it could be paid for by the town or could be paid for by the users, reflected in the rates. And then there was a discussion of sizing that facility in an amount so that the system could be expanded to service residential areas around the center where at least, or along streets where at least 40% of the users signed up, or 40% of the residents along a particular street or in a particular area signed up and said, yes, I'm willing to pay for that.
The hookup. So it's the cost of hookup. They
Yes.
pay the cost of hookup.
Right. So the cost to the users would be upfront a $4,000 per household tap fee, which brings the water from the main to the property line. Then a variable cost from the property line to the person's home, which for round numbers might be $3,000 or $4,000. That, say, call it $7,000 worth of capital expenditures could be financed by the Suffolk County Water Authority and paid through the rates over a 20-year period. So the overall cost to a property owner would be the Fire Island volumetric rate, with kind of the base rate, plus whatever surcharge there would be for the transmission main from Sachem's Woods into the area, plus, if the homeowner elected, a surcharge for the $4,000 per household tap fee, plus, if the homeowner elected, a surcharge for the service line from the curb stop to the home.
Right. And that ultimately is going to wind up translating into some sort of a monthly water bill.
Correct.
Right.
And so the policy questions, or the questions for, I think, the town or the community to confront or to address are how to pay for the transmission main from Sachem's Wood into the area. Is that something that it is an entire town expense that the town might bond for? Or is that something that the town would say, no, the beneficiaries of that area should pay in their rates, or some mix of the two? The issue about Sachem's, whether the use of the property for a well field in Sachem's Woods is appropriate. The additional question that just came out of the last discussion, which is, what is the degree of I would say cross-contamination between wastewater flowing through the aquifer in that area and water quality coming out of the wells. And then there's the kind of the larger question of how do we communicate this? How is this communicated to the affected residents so people can make their own decisions about whether they want to participate in this? But the idea was, okay, let's start to build a system that serves the town buildings, and let's build it with sufficient capacity to provide drinking water for those in the center who would choose to participate in this.
Build something that could be modularly extended.
Because when you think about it, if you're going to put a 6-inch main under the street coming down north versus a 12-inch main, the marginal cost of that is immaterial. So you might as well size it. If you're going to dig the trench,
Water for the whole center community.
just size it. It's the right thing. So,
Okay.
Lisa, did I get it all?
Oh, yeah, you did. I think one of the things that I learned from this is, because I just asked Andrew why 2 lines coming from the Midway main line, and then why going down those 2 roads. if we were just going to supply municipal buildings, it would be seemingly much more closer to just put it down the Thomas Street. But if you're looking to make it accessible to other residents, then you would split that line. Of course, splitting that line is going to increase the cost.
Right.
So I wasn't quite clear. I didn't ask Joe.
Although,
about that.
but as you think about what you're advocating for.
Right, because I think
Which is that people can get drinking water
it's
eventually.
$1.5 million per mile for piping. That was, that's what he quoted us.
Yep.
So he's sort of the $2 million project. That's
Right.
what the
Okay.
final expense was.
And the well field's on him. And that's on Suffolk, treatment's on Suffolk
It was
County.
a good review.
That's very, very helpful. We're obviously going to need to do a lot of number crunching. We're going to need to put this together in a bunch of different ways for people so that they can understand it.
The well field and the treatment,
And the
and the
treatment.
treatment, which could be,
Who knows?
sizable, yeah.
Because Sachem's Wood, by the way, was set aside specifically for water source
Right.
by the planning group.
Yep.
So that's not an issue.
Deeded, okay.
It's not in the deed, but,
There's not restrictions.
no, but that's typically, right, you only have restrictions, what you can't do, not what you can. But there is a resolution, did you see the resolution?
Yeah, with the intention of.
Yes, it's described as the justification for the purpose.
Purpose of
Yeah.
setting it aside in the first place. Okay, so good. So look, we lots to think about there on both of these things. I think one of the things, my takeaway that I expressed at the meeting yesterday was that it's pretty clear to me that you need to have a water supply protection area. If you're thinking about using Sachem's Woods, you really have to think about the area immediately around Sachem's Woods and all those flow lines that store in Sachem's.
Or other areas.
Again, if that's going to be a water supply that will then take over from people who've lost their own potable water, their own wells.
But how do you protect water? How do you protect wastewater from going there? I mean,
Well, just reflecting on the model we discussed, conceivably, you could connect anybody upstream of your supply wells, public supply wells, to a wastewater system like we've gotten, which.
through the creation of a wastewater treatment system.
Right,
Yes.
you could put everybody in the conservation zone such that their waste goes out of the way.
Yeah.
And your public supply wells are within that zone, and then outside of,
Now,
right now, no, everybody's on their own.
everybody's still going there.
So if we still have everybody online, Coco, if we could go back to our guests perhaps? Yep.
Unfortunately,
Can't hear now. She thinks that.
something happened with the flash, we lost sound, so.
Having technical
Zoom is on
difficulties.
technical, so let's keep talking about the water supply protection.
One moment, Peter.
Yes.
Your guest had to leave, they just sent a notice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
They
yeah,
only
USGS.
had till-
Here we go.
I
You
apologize.
ask Alice if she can speak to us.
Yeah. Let's,
Yeah.
yes.
Alice, can you hear us?
I can hear you now. You went out for a while.
Okay.
First of all, Alice and Linda, I have to apologize. We have had a full agenda. I should have had you, I didn't confirm for the USGS people they could stay an hour and a half. They kindly joined us at 2 o'clock. I'm not surprised if an hour was their limit for what they could do. So we will, but they obviously heard a whole earful.
Right.
Right. So, okay, so let's just talk for a moment about what's going on at Menantic Creek. I kind of want, I'm going to take, go ahead, Andrew.
I keep thinking about these people who live in the center,
Right.
who have this
We need water.
water quality issue.
Absolutely.
And so where do we take that discussion? What would this,
Right, I know.
No, I don't mean to, I understand we don't want to short shrift that.
You mean with a concept and price in hand for
Yeah.
a solution?
I mean, should we try and flesh that out and take it to what it would mean to an individual homeowner in terms of, I think first, we would need to find out I would like to know the town's view as to whether they would want to participate in a program that provides drinking water to the town buildings, the school in the center. Because that's the kind of the backbone of it. And then the next question is, all right, if that backbone is attractive to the town, then there's the second question about, all right, if that's expanded, there's a public discussion and a neighborhood discussion, I think, that would have to follow as to, look, this is what it could cost you on this particular street to have potable water. Are you interested in that? And that dialogue kind of needs to get going. Is that what we should encourage and recommend to the town? I don't know the governance here. I don't know the decision making. I just don't want the discussion to end because I think
The discussion was never going to end, and it will not end.
If I could just tag very quickly on that.
Go right into it because I
Something
think
that Joe
that
Crony told us
everybody's
is
interested in
that nitrate kits, if the town were to buy them, they're relatively cheap. They can go to homeowners around the area where suspected high nitrate levels are. And that way we can start gathering information to find out which properties are the most vulnerable, because as we know, it could vary. 50 feet.
And Greg
So-
and Ken were actually thinking about purchasing a nitrogen meter for the purpose, something just even a little more impressive. But we, frequently get nitrogen kits to get strips that you can do tests.
Eco-fair.
We do it and $20, you can get 40, 50 of them.
So-
Yes, and you could fan out and you can go to neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And you can begin to illustrate to people on one level or another, assuming that they're friendly and let you in the door and you're able to.
I did have a conversation with somebody who is on Midway Road between Jasper and Bowditch, and I stressed that that person get their water tested. They got their water tested, and that would be the first person I would go to and say, here are some strips. I don't know how often you test your water, but I think that the campaign to go door to door and say, I know people on such and such street, and start getting this data. It's something we can do right away.
Lisa, I'm 100% in favor of next week.
Okay.
Okay, so, but again, so the answer is we're definitely not letting go of this topic. I think of it as probably our most important topic is to begin to offer people, what is realistic. And Andrew, you're absolutely right to be asking, well, what is realistic? And so we need to continue that part of the conversation. But I think that it's unfair to the folks at the other end of Menantic, having established this science, showing that they face a 30-year flow of sludge to their community that cannot be stopped, to not now include them in the discussion as well. So there's both ends. We have the far end of the pipe where the sludge can't be stopped, and we have locally, right across School Street, you could stop it within 6 months, the flow of sludge. So, and I think the context with Menantic, that, the USGS folks aren't with us right now, but we have to at least kind of put this on the table. They've, after a 40-year struggle, gotten the county to agree to open up to dredge at the end of Menantic. We now know there's this 30-year flow coming through. They've observed over the last 30 years, the collapse of their ecosystem. The loss of the ecosystem services, the treatment of waste, the consuming of organic material that could occur if you had a living ecosystem going on there, the processing of wastes that could occur if it was still alive and healthy, but it's not. So we have the ability to get a little bit more tidal flushing into that zone, which should help. I've met with Alice and Linda and their group, and a number of other people that I've known kind of all my life distantly, like Hap Bowditch and folks like that. And there's there's memory there. There's muscle memory about what used to get done there. They used to Linda, maybe you could talk about what Hap was telling us.
I was superintendent forever ago. They're right at the head of the
Linda,
creek.
can you go to the podium? I'm so sorry.
It's okay. They're based at the head of the creek. So what they used to do when Suffolk County was dredging other areas, they would do it themselves. He would tow behind
A mushroom anchor, right?
or big tires or whatever, on an outgoing tide, and just tow it all the way out. So we had a center channel, tow it all the way out. And, not during the summer, it was off season. But this is forever ago. This is my lifetime.
Right, but to allow water to flow in boats to have a channel.
Right, I mean, it used to be where they brought the south ferries for Hurricane Bowl. They'd come in there, and we have photos that my dad has from, I guess, the 60s. I don't know, Alice, maybe you could, anyway, of the ferries coming in there, but.
That was in the 60s.
Yeah, in the 60s.
Maybe as late as the 70s, because I took some of those pictures.
Okay.
Right. but-
Anyway, so it was maintained. So it was dredged. It was just dredged by individuals as opposed to the county.
It's a different community then.
Right.
Now,
Right, but that's the problem with the county, is my understanding, because we looked into this, I want to say in 2014 or 15, I came in with HAP trying to get the whole creek dredged, at least a center channel. Because there hadn't been a history of them maintaining current dredging, they weren't going to start something new. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That was the feedback that I got. So it was kind of like, it's a dead end. We'll do the neck, but not to the head.
There's also spoils.
Yes. and
Spoils, was I understand it
So
right.
that's our problem now, because the spoils are because everything has died.
And because of this flow of
Because of
waste
this flow.
to that area.
So we have this situation that,
It's not sand, it's basically.
it was sand, now it's just way below.
Now again, the earlier
We used to clam, we used to dig in the sand to get, so there is sand under there. What are you looking to do? Well, right now, we have this situation. Well, we have a situation. I think what we need to do is figure out a way to test the water on a regular basis in the creek so we know what we're looking at. I don't know if you have any documentation, any information about what is the level that's going in there now of nitrogen?
Well, actually, what I was going to suggest is we do a repeat of what we just did for Gardner's Creek. So with the USGS data, we know every house, every property that's within the contributing watershed to Menantic. We can do an assessment of what's happening at each parcel, if it's developed, if it's not developed, and set some targets for how much you need to cut the nitrogen in that watershed. How many households need to be upgraded to IA systems? How many, if that even can fix your overabundance of nitrogen. For these types of watersheds like Gardner's Creek and Menantic as well, you have a number of nutrient inputs, not just wastewater. But it's usually assumed that 50% of the total that's allowed would come from wastewater. So we can start with wastewater because that's, I think, probably your biggest contributor. In Gardner's Creek, we were 300% over what's tolerated for the creek just by what's there already from wastewater. So we hadn't even looked at fertilizer inputs and anything else. So you're way over in general. I assume that's probably the case for Menantic as well. But from there, we have real goals that we can achieve. So we can start looking at IA, priority areas. We can start talking about fertilizer restrictions. That's when you've got a pin on the wall for what you need to get your numbers down to know that the condition won't continue to worsen. And then you look at restorative methods for how do we get the sediment out of here? How do we do some ecological restoration? And town, through these two lovely councilwomen, have already made a commitment to investing in natural solutions through Cornell Cooperative for shellfish and eelgrass restoration. And I think that's the ticket here. Once you have, and in conjunction with stopping the contributions.
Right. We can do so much, but if the environment will allow it to.
If it will continue to degrade, dredging is one of those mechanical solutions that is, arguably a Band-Aid, but it's not, it's not addressing the cause.
Correct. But what it does do is it refreshes the whole.
Totally.
area.
Give nature a chance.
And given that we do have waste streams that we cannot stop right now.
Exactly.
A certain amount of flushing is going to be
And
appropriate.
maybe, is there a way to figure out how to?
How much-
Science is an amazing thing. Why can't we figure out how to maybe
Well, so this is, so again, the USGS
You're right,
can help
yeah.
us in terms of understanding what the impacts of various steps are. So we can figure out, again, how much dissolved oxygen that is remaining now in various portions of the creek, presumably less the further up we go.
Right.
As we open up the base of it, we can see how much that dissolved, how far up that dissolved oxygen reaches.
Right.
If there are ways to loosen soils in that area and allow just the tide to take care of certain things without spoils, but a little bit more flow of water into those areas, not only do I think that that potentially could help us, but we can watch it in real time. If we're doing the citizen science along the way, we can see, okay, now how far does the oxygen reach?
And we have the model of Fresh Pond, really,
For doing this kind of work.
with doing this kind of work.
Citizens.
I have a quick question. What is the landscape legacy? Is that contributing at all to Mananic?
What do you mean landscape?
Well, the dump. I mean, not landscape, landfill legacy.
Landfill?
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that. I can tell you that we have, the water monitoring we do around the landfill
Yeah,
is good.
it's good?
Does
Yeah.
it flow towards the creek or does it flow away?
Because I couldn't see that on schematic.
Yeah,
So,
Towards the head of West Neck.
yeah, I think the other way a little bit.
towards the bay?
Like towards Daniel Lord Road,
Okay,
in that direction.
No, it's that creek in the bay.
Yeah.
But quite frankly, I don't think that's
An
a
issue.
primary,
Yeah.
I don't think it's helping anybody, but I don't think that's a primary.
Well, it was just decades of garbage and
Yeah.
everything being dumped there.
Yeah,
Right, so I would think that there would be
Well, so
something
it's,
to that.
so that's affecting West Neck Bay and West Neck Creek.
Yeah.
So
But for these guys.
another body of water that we need to be concerned with.
Again, this whole watershed, but for the Monantic group, we also have, the town recycling center down the dump.
Well, that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, so we're going to be dealing with some sorts of need for, we're going to see outputs flowing through that area. So studying what's going on in that is going to be critical to any planning that you're doing.
Right, so we have a space that we'd like to, we'll do it ourselves. We just need guidance, instruction, equipment, or, you tell us what we need to do and we'll monitor, whether it's every Sunday at 5, whatever.
Has the dredging thing been turned down by Suffolk County?
My understanding is that they will dredge the neck of the creek up to the
How far up?
landing, Tarkel.
Where?
Tarkel, which is halfway through the neck, not even, we're talking about the head of the creek.
Oh, I know,
all the way in.
I
Yeah,
understand what
so-
you're talking about.
Is there any reason why they won't go any further? Did they
Well,
get?
it's been the spoils, what to do with them. I mean, we have a letter from my dad from the Army Corps of Engineers talking about, again, Alice, that was in the 50s, where they were gonna dredge, they were gonna
1965.
so that they were actually gonna make an island in the middle of Menanchik Creek with the spoils.
And they were also going to dump the spoils on everybody's property around the creek. But of course, back then, there was hardly anyone there.
Right, I know your pictures, there's nobody on the other side. But, so, I mean, it's been on the table for a long
I
time.
know, I think it's the worst, our interior piece of water that we have. It's worse than West Neck,
Absolutely.
I believe.
Yeah.
Cockles is pretty clean, I
Yep.
believe, relatively speaking. Monantic is really on the way of filling in essence.
So there may be areas that have to fill in, and there may be other areas where a little bit of widening or loosening is possible, and it may be possible to do that. The county will do yay much, but if we have a developed science program, we know what we have, we can propose solutions that can be done more.
Like
with
eating an
citizen
elephant, you
and
take one bite at
community
a
effort.
time, so basically you just do what you can do with the dredging, and then take it from there.
Yeah, the problem with the spoils when you get deeper into the creek is they're so heavily organic.
It's
You
mud.
can't dispose of them the
That's
same
right.
way you do the sandy spoils, like when we dredge other areas like South Ferry, and you can put it up on the.
We can put it
You
in
can't do
Shell
that.
Beach.
You actually would have to like truck it to Pennsylvania or something to dispose of it. They
That's the
won't
problem.
allow,
Right.
yeah.
Exactly the problem.
There's no way to really get rid of them.
So again, we're not necessarily talking about all areas having a dredge solution. Right? In some areas, you may be building up something else that you're.
Well, it's a spoil issue.
The truth is, one of the solutions that was proposed for Fresh Pond would be applicable here, which is a permeable reactive barrier. You can put something that will eliminate that flow of nitrogen from the head of the creek. There's a technology, the passive technology that will
If you
filter.
put it in the lawn before the creek,
Yes.
the beach area.
Yes, absolutely. But again, I don't want to limit the range of solutions here because, this is, unless somebody's doing the citizen science, putting it together, what's here, we've got, the community and the town we've got a lot of data that just came out of, sort of almost by accident, gives them a lot more to work on.
Right, so
Hard.
do we know when that dredging is gonna be, the neck?
I'm actually not sure when they've scheduled it for, but it has been approved.
Okay,
So
'cause-
that's the next thing to find out.
Because the reason I asked.
Next winter, probably next winter.
Next one, okay, because I was thinking if we could start the testing now,
You should.
right, that would be good, because then we have a body of information.
It seems like you need to draw up some kind of timeline and plan for all of the steps that may.
But Lisa, they're asking our help, so, because they.
I don't know what I'm doing.
But the citizens-
I'm not a science person.
Okay.
Right, so I apologize, Kate, no, but we have USGS scientists who are willing to help us develop a protocol for doing citizen science, and they need to wrap their heads around the problem, which is why it was great that they heard all of this.
Right.
But I'm now going to need to apologize, say, I know we went on an hour and a half, not an hour, you may not have expected that, and then we're still now needing to develop a protocol for these folks. They've got 37 folks who are like, I'm not watching them, I sent that chart to them, and all of a sudden, I kicked a beehive. There was
Okay.
people buzzing and
that's
saying,
good.
I'm looking at this.
Then that's a great resource.
I wanna use
Use this.
Right. Yeah, so we have foot soldiers to do the citizen science. We have scientists who can advise. It's just up to us to kind of put them together. And me, I'll help. continue.
Sounds like you got to get Hap back out there with the tire.
Yeah.
Well, that hat is dead.
Well, there's another Hap.
Yeah.
Generational thing.
It should be, this has all got to be intergenerational stuff. All right, so we went through a lot of material. It's all intersecting material. In the 5 minutes that we have till an hour and a half, are there things that got short shrifted that you?
I'm just wondering about priorities in general.
Yeah,
Things on our plate.
and I think that part of Andrew's frustration
Yeah.
is that we have these tasks to do, but we don't seem to have the time to get them done and fully explored. There's just so much.
It can
Well,
happen
is
in
there a
an hour and a
priority
half
for the
interview.
town? Does the town board have can help us with a priority possibly? I don't know.
About 75 million things too.
Want any of the balls?
Yeah, really, which one do you
I mean,
want?
they have so many things on their plate too, and this is
I
like,
know it's irrigation,
yeah.
that's what we want to go back to, cistern/irrigation. And
Irrigation's
gotta
gonna
get
become
back
a
on
big,
what you started, Lisa, with
Yeah.
fertile-
Yeah, I think
the
the
fertilizer
ball's been
district.
dropped on that because it is April, but no, I'm not throwing it out. I'm just saying,
So the pesticides, herbicides, we realize we can't really
It's all
regulate.
education.
It's all DEC.
right.
Fertilizer stuff, we can educate, and then regulate. So as soon as you have, I sent out the flyer about, from the DEC on the proper use of fertilizers and things like that. So if we could just come up with maybe some educational posters maybe, or something that we can put on the website, that we can get that information out while we have time to work on legislation to actually regulate, I would love to double team it.
Well, next month, we're going to get one representative from Cornell
Okay.
here, and I would strongly suggest we allocate time for this in next month's meeting. I know there's so much that needs to be done, but,
Lisa, we deferred having that Cornell educator with us this time precisely because we knew we would
Right.
be not really doing them justice.
right.
So we will not be crowding our schedule with additional things. This time there's clearly a certain topic that had to be processed.
a question to Joe on this summer shortly with the Gardner's Bay irrigation issue and the use of wastewater for that. How do you see that as a priority for them and for the town as far as what the uptake would be, because that could change things a little bit in this area.
I'm not sure what
Too
the
soon?
club's timeline is. I know that they have expressed interest and support for the broader wastewater, centralized plan, because it could be an aid in meeting their irrigation needs. Certainly the town would welcome that partnership. We have in the past looked at reuse of wastewater many times.
Because this could be separated in a sense, because it could be a separate issue for later on, and still move ahead with the community wastewater project that we have here.
No, but I think you're right, Ken, that this is, it's critical because the true answer is you don't want to dump in either creek. You want to reuse water, right?
Well, that's a nice, I mean.
It would be nice not to dump in either creek.
Well, they have an irrigation requirement, which means taking water out, which is gonna, we're gonna do it probably no matter one way or the other, more than likely.
Yeah, what I sense will happen, they're studying what they can reasonably support in terms of irrigation extraction.
Right.
They're going to present to the town, which will likely come to this committee for an opinion on whether the code should be adjusted to allow it, and whether that's within the town policy. If they can demonstrate that this is something they can do without negative impact, then we'll have to have that discussion.
The idea of getting some information out, by the way, to be about using advertising or publicity or something relative to the center and the nitrate issue, is something that we should do without any other kind of influence relative to.
I'm just talking to people right now, and I'll keep talking, yeah.
So that seems to be one of the biggest projects that we would have to deal with relative to that resourcing the water and all the things that go with it.
And educating people about the center.
Yeah.
We feel that that's the highest issue relative to community health and safety.
So I think.
Relative to all of the
I
things.
have a suggestion, it's kind of really.
I get a lot of people that I talk.
Off the wall stuff. So how about being an opening act? So over the summer, late in the summer, August probably, we plan on having a comprehensive plan, town hall meeting
That's
in the
right.
school auditorium. And I think we need an opening act. That would be you guys. Go get up and talk, talk these topics. Take 10 or 15 minutes.
We did that last year.
We had a very successful meeting at the library. We had 50, 60 people, and it was very, very successful going over the big
This would be
picture.
hundreds.
Yeah, we do that.
Just saying, put it in the back of your head.
I think it's a great idea. You're gonna reach a lot of people.
Yeah.
Well,
What?
And while nobody's here now, or fewer people are here now, I think that we reached a lot of people. My sense is that from 2 weeks ago till now, the message came across that in fact, people in the center have lost potable water. That's a message that I think people were surprised at when I talked to people 2 weeks ago, because I never heard that people had lost that the center didn't have potable water. But that red zone that's marked greater than 10 milligrams nitrogen, which is a large portion of the center, says to you that the center has lost potable water.
But Peter, we will still have green lawns. And it's not just about potable water, it's also about health of the waterways.
Absolutely.
Tom Fields. Fixing the, cart, but the horse is dying.
Yeah.
We do habitat restoration. So yes to all of it. That's what I say, yes to all of it. And education is not one and done.
No.
It makes sense. It is.
It's gotta be ongoing, and we've gotta be on top of it, just.
Health and safety.
It has to be your remit, sorry, here, put it right back on you. Your remit.
Yeah.
and Like you say, so, on a regular sort of quarterly basis, you know how it is.
Well,
You get a message to change your behavior, you might have to get that message for 10 years before you're actually.
that's why we go to school. We get it from kindergarten
But let me just
to master's class.
say that I would be more than happy to go to school and speak to the students.
Is your community science.
Yeah.
This is,
Projects.
I would be, and I intend to raise that with the school.
Yeah.
So
You have to really bring it down to an
Well, maybe you're underestimating these kids.
I don't know.
From a graduate.
Former educator.
Yes.
Yes, I was a former high school educator.
Sometimes if you ask a lot of them, you get more. Yeah, anyway.
One thing I would like to follow up on, the nitrate strips. Are there any? Can we get them? I personally will take them and list people and go door to door and just,
The color code ones
I
you're talking
don't know
about?
what they are.
Easy.
I never
Yeah.
had to do
They're
it.
cheap, yeah. They give you a little color band, it reacts with your sample, and then you line it up on a scale. They're good for recognizing if you have an egregious problem. If you're anywhere in the middle, it's how good your vision is, I guess. And
Next
is it
week-
purple or is it,
So Amazon.com.
I'm going to say next week, can you and I talk about that?
Sure, yeah.
I'll make we'll sit down and we'll talk about it so I understand it.
So will they tell you, if 10 is if 10 is the maximum contaminant level cutoff?
Yeah.
If you're 5, will they tell you if you're 5 versus 15?
I think there's some variation in.
Graduation.
So,
Yeah.
but I have a bottle of 50 of them. I've gotten them all the time. And
The ones that I have seen do not have like you're over the limit indication.
no, but you can tell 5, 7, 10.
2 to 5,
Yeah.
5 to 10.
Yeah, you can tell.
10 to
It's like
20 of
that.
them.
And-
Okay,
A
so,
little bit pregnant, a lot pregnant.
You don't want to get too definitive because then people, you want to make it
all right, so
simple.
if we're looking at, if anecdotally, we're hearing numbers of, 25, 30, 40,
Yeah.
they're going to show us that.
The strips will tell you there's a problem right away, immediately.
Okay.
Yeah,
You know
no
where,
doubt.
where
Yeah.
else we should go, Lisa? And I'll join you on this day.
Okay.
Here, I think I will be. End of April, Lions Club cleanup day. Everybody turns out at the firehouse.
That's one of these posters going.
Strip in there,
Oh, it's a 26.
Great idea.
I'll return your card, what street
Great idea,
you live on,
BJ.
what block you live on.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's a part of the Lions thing anyway.
Yep.
We can do that.
All right, Ken, you're a lion, right?
You can just ask people to bring a cup of their water and you can just.
And you can test it. We do
Like
that.
literally,
We've done
bring a
that
jar of
before.
water and we'll just test it at the site.
Oh my
Because
gosh.
you need the bottle to match it to. So like.
Oh, yeah.
Right, the scale is on the
Scale
ball.
on the bottle to match the test
like
strip.
pool
So
testers.
if people just bring a jar of water from their tap, you can just test it on site. It takes 2 seconds. You read it right there.
Okay.
Could do the town hall, have it at a work session.
It's 30 seconds.
Bring your water to work
We'll give you
day.
a bag to collect the trash.
So we need somebody just for that.
Yes, ma'am. Maybe.
2 or 3 people.
We've done those at the Green Expo. We've done this.
Okay.
We've even taken down, I have some spreadsheets with like where we took down, what rough data we got from it.
Well, that would be good. So we could take that, we'd have a map.
It's a good thing, yes. It is a very good thing. But we know, however, that all these buildings in the center have non-potable water.
Not all.
We have.
Many of them. We are getting more than 10 milligrams. The water coming from the center is tests at more than 10 milligrams.
We need to deal with that.
We need to deal with that, I agree.
Yeah. Water
And
quality.
knowing that that's the truth is an important thing, so.
Yeah, well, both that and beautiful S's and A's, the EPA is going to be changing their probably
They've
level.
already changed it. I mean,
Oh, it has been.
they're bringing it
Oh, it's
down.
effective for some period of time ahead now.
Yeah.
In other words,
The levels are all going down.
that has been done.
I understand it's coming down to 4
Yeah.
from 10.
I didn't know for
Yep.
sure this number was established yet. That was why I was.
Yep, no, it's,
All right.
they're
So
having,
The MCL is coming down from 10 to 4.
yep.
Yeah.
Yes,
Which is effectively a non-detect.
it's non-detectable.
Yep.
Yeah.
And New York's is low, but not that low. I think New York's is 10.
Water treatment will change.
They will have to comply and go low.
Water treatment's going to change everything. If something like that happens, all of a sudden, it's not an issue of do I want to or do I not? There's no way that you can get around that.
No, and the onus is on Suffolk County Water and other public,
That's right.
municipal water supply. One more question I want to just throw out there, and this has to do with the water, getting SQA to come in and put water in. Is it advantageous? Does it make any sense to create a water district? Because if Suffolk County comes in and brings water here, they will be the entity. It won't be like West Neck Water, where they come in and we're still effectively overseeing it, you know,
That's
like
right.
what we did when we went through all that contract language. If they come in and they set up a water district, they will be here, they will politely speak with the town on what they're going to be doing, but the town will really have no say, like West Neck Water did.
Peter's thing.
So setting up a water district island-wide, is that something we should be thinking about? Is it
How do we pay-
onerous?
Yeah, the whole thing is how do we want to pay for this service in the future, in essence? In essence, for example, do we want to tax everybody, you know, basically, and put in our taxes? Do we want to have a district? Do we want to have
Right.
sub-districts?
Part of it is financing, and districts can help with financing. Andrew, you wanted to say?
So there's also a long-term risk issue, which is if Suffolk County builds that water treatment system and then we put in a transmission main, let's say Shelter Island somehow pays for it. And we go into some of these neighborhoods and the EPA changes the rules on water quality issues, which affect the whole nation. Or there is a contaminant in that all of a sudden comes to light in that system,
An emerging
an
contaminant,
emergent, anything.
anything, yes.
Yeah, all of a sudden a plume of MTBE, or they change the rules and there's an emerging contaminant. There's a PFOAS problem. The fix for that water quality issue is on Suffolk County,
Distributed over their rate base.
distributed over their entire rate base.
Okay,
Whereas if we own a system and we're operating that, and we own it, we're operating it and so forth,
Like we become a water company.
we become a water company and also like the Heights, all right? Because the Heights is its own.
well, we would let
entity.
SCOA manage it. Have
Yeah,
SCOA manage
but
it.
the point is, if it's our asset, the cost of complying to that higher level of quality or dealing with that contaminant is entirely on us.
That's right.
And
Versus all
so
of Suffolk County.
that's,
I don't know, Andrew, because if West Neck Water has to put in the carbon filtration for PFAS, they're going to do that. We
They're
don't
gonna
do
do
that. And there's
But
no financial responsibility
That's right.
to West Neck Water for that.
and so that's all got to get worked out. So I'm just saying that
That's what Andrew's saying. If you need a
Yeah,
carbon
he's saying-
filtration, it's not your problem.
That's right. That's why you.
Well, I thought he was arguing if it's the town that is owning the district and they're managing it, would become our responsibility. And what I'm saying is that West Neck Water essentially owns the district per se through the town, or the town owns it.
Or the manager.
And they're managing it, but they still have the responsibility to mitigate for contaminants. That's not on us.
So that's within your lease,
Yeah.
in that lease agreement.
However, if we can just cut through for a second, it's very hard to imagine. Joe, I didn't clear this with anybody, and people may very much disagree with me. It's hard for me to imagine that we do not need a center water district of some sort. When we talk about protection, water supply protection areas, when we talk about creating a system for people in this region, in this section of town, there's going to be some town engagement in managing this, and maybe some, so I have a very, very hard time seeing how we're not starting to look at some sort of regulations around this town center of town, some sort of district. I don't know what it is.
Okay, so I guess I would turn it into a question. Is there a way that this community can have a meaningful say on the boundaries of a system, the future of a system, where the risk of future water quality compliance is spread over a much bigger customer base than us? In other words, can we have our cake and eat it too?
Meaning a district for the entire island?
Yes.
Or a district for the entire island, or if we have Suffolk County in as an operator.
Everywhere.
can we share the capital, can the capital cost burden of future contamination be on the entire Suffolk County customer base, not just on
It
us?
seems like
And I don't know.
but it does seem like it is already. They're already, when PFAS comes along, they have to upgrade all of the
Yes, they're
systems
the
they're working on,
operators,
and
yeah.
they're already charging their whole rate base for it right now, today, even when they don't have to do that work.
Like if they come into, if they have to do that on the West Neck Water wells,
They've already been charging you.
we are not paying for
That's right.
anything extra. It's
That's
going to
right.
have to be on
Okay.
them.
And that's what we want to continue.
Right, and that, so.
At hypothetical,
so we-
is in our
we
surcharge
want
already.
that, But I
Yeah,
do
that's
not
in your
see
water
how-
quality,
Right,
$40 surcharge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
$81.
And we could wash our hands and step back and let Suffolk County come in if like the community wants something. I think they're entitled to go in and create something themselves.
They can.
If they can, if we do nothing at all.
I think my
And some
question,
people they prefer, just let them do it and we do nothing at all and we wash our hands of it. I somehow think we're not.
Lisa, you're asking if we should own it or we should not own it?
I'm just putting out the question, and I don't know the answer. Is there any advantage to creating an island-wide water district? Don't know the answer. I don't know if the attorney has the answer.
We've tackled the problem before. The two basic advantages of doing so are you can raise funds. That is, if you have a district, you can have a charge on your property taxes. And you have a management board. Whether that's a good thing, if you want a bunch of our Shelter Islanders to get together and be a management board for this thing or not, and whether that'll create more stress or not, I don't know. But those are the two things, those are the advantages. That's what it does to have a district.
I need to think out loud here. I think also there's a political season. And we're sort of in the middle of it, we're starting it, we're depending on your perspective. And I'm not sure, there's let me back up just a quick second. There's some fear and money opposing the wastewater treatment plant based on downzoning concerns and density, increased density. And I believe there's been a distortion campaign behind that fear of increased density and downzoning. If we start to move to establish a water district, do we fan the flames of that?
Yes.
Given that if enough people want water, it'll happen anyway.
Suffolk County can do it anyway.
Or do we tamp down the fear and the flames of that by establishing a water district and saying, therefore, we have a little teeny bit more control? You know, I don't know, but I just think that's a consideration.
All right.
And you're all a scientist, and I don't think you want to think about that.
So we got into that issue when Suffolk County came in to run the West Neck system. And we learned that as a matter of their enabling legislation, they can go anywhere they want to.
Right.
So there is a provision in that lease that says, if you're going to extend service outside the boundaries of which you're now serving, you have to give the town a 30-day notice. And what that should do is that should encourage a conversation within the community about that extension of service, which is as much, quote, local control as we were able to obtain under the enabling legislation. So my take on this is I'd rather have 90 days than 30 days, but that's a pretty good way to have a deliberate community-wide discussion of the question.
I have a question.
Sorry, Meg.
No, no, you're good. Is that an expansion of West Neck Water District beyond its current boundary that we get 30 days notice, or is that at the establishment of a new water system on the island?
It would be outside from what I understand.
Because
I think it's anything beyond what they're now doing.
That's right.
Or beyond what they are not within the district that's not yet served, because I thought they could do that.
They can go within the district.
Yeah, they could
But if they
expand.
want to get outside the district,
Then
they have to
That's when
give
it
them 30
applies.
days. But that's also consistent with how they operate.
yes, yes. And
It's also by
technically,
request.
it's
Yeah.
by request, and technically that is, so the greater Shelter Island that is outside of West Neck Water District, outside of Shelter Island Heights, and outside of Dune
Right.
River is the Suffolk County Water Authority Water District, because we are not district.
That's correct.
So they have that ability.
They can stick a hole
If there
and
is demand. So if the public demands that they bring water to a specific area,
They can do
then
it.
they can decide whether or not they would like to.
They don't own the property that, of West Neck Water District. They don't own the pump house.
Correct.
Right.
That's one advantage.
That's the town's.
If they came in and they put a water system in the town, that's their money, that's their ownership. So you'd have to work out, the easements and all leases and all of that.
Right.
So that is, we still have the property.
Yeah.
And that will be turned over to them in 25 years, depending on, I won't be here, but whoever decides what the next lease extension will be. So, but if they come in and they just put it all in, it's all theirs. So it's just a consideration.
It's a consideration, but I'll maybe this will be controversial. But in my opinion, the public health issues that we are dealing with around drinking water quality, particularly in the center, are much more important than those governance issues. So we should try and solve those water quality issues, okay, with an acceptable governance arrangement. Yep. But bottom line is we need to solve those water quality issues.
Yeah, I agree.
And as far as I can tell, so it doesn't get us there faster to have it talking about the creation of a district. What does get us there faster is having the public demanding that they have potable water. So I think that our education discussion and our thoughts that we need to be thinking about going directly to the specific homeowners, possibly offering testing, but mostly offering the willingness to talk about the thing. That's our highest priority, as far as I can tell.
We need 40%.
We need 40%. We need folks to understand that, one, they don't have potable water, and two, potable water is achievable.
I think you start that entire process by convincing people to test their water, period. If they test their water and they realize they have a problem, then they'll be concerned about what the solution could be. If you just tell them that they have a problem, they're like, no, I don't, it's fine, it tastes great. You have to first convince people to test their water.
Yeah.
So this is part of why Ken and Greg were saying, let's get ourselves a nitrogen test, not more than the strips, just because it's more impressive, but a thing to meter and offer, to go and do nitrogen
Bring us a
metering.
glass of water. Knock on the door, bring us a glass of water. If we take your number, because that number was scary, Andrew, $7,000, $8,000 for a homeowner to hook up. Advertised over 20 years, it's $30 a month. That's a little less scary.
That's what I mean. It can be financed.
Yeah, it can,
Right, we have to
just-
do the number crunching before we.
You have to have the numbers in your
You
head.
don't want to scare them.
That's right. People get their water for free now.
Yeah.
That's hard to beat.
Well,
I mean,
kind of. I mean, they're treating.
I know a lot of people buying bottled water,
I
including me.
know, right, and so if you could say, well, you're spending, $10 a week on water?
Right.
Bottled water, then it's not free.
Cheaper.
All right.
There's water treatment everywhere on the
And
island.
you just turn the tap, amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
So there's another series of questions around this is, can we test the town's interest in paying for a transmission main down North Midway and then on Smith Street and Jasper over to the town buildings? Because that's the core of the system,
Off of which others will hook.
off of which others will.
Branch out.
So is that something that the town has an appetite for funding? Because Suffolk County Water would do,
The system, like the treatment.
they'd do the well field and the treatment. The town would do
$2 million worth of pipe.
the piping into the area. And then the neighbors, to the extent that they wanted to extend that system into various areas, would pay for the extensions and the lines to the houses. So do we want to test with the town the interest?
Right, they have the
in-
will.
It's a very good point, actually.
That would be a community-wide
I think it's a
cost.
twofold question. is there public demand for it? You know, do the people in the center want the water? Like if we bring the main, are they gonna wanna hook up to it? Because that's what justifies the purchase in the first place. You know, the town board may think it's a great idea, but if nobody in the center is willing to hook up, then you wasted town money. So it's twofold. You need to know that there is public will to have this service brought to them and that they're willing to hook up and pay for it. And not just that, you know, the 5 people at the table know that this is in the public's best interest if the public doesn't own it.
We don't have anyone
Okay,
coming
so-
for it. We don't have anyone coming in here and say, I got my copy.
Not yet, but
I agree,
You know what I mean?
but I have a factual question is, do we know that the water in the library, in the school, and the town building are meeting
Yeah.
a 10 milligram MCL on nitrogen?
Generally, yes. Sometimes they go over. The school has been over in the past before at 10. But the periphery is where the problem is. You know, it's not just the town buildings. However, the burden for the town to operate these sites as individual well owners is becoming more challenging and expensive. The well at Town Hall, for instance, is non-conforming with our septic system. It doesn't meet standards for a community water system, which is what this is, because it's serving the public. So our burden for just operating these is effectively 7 little public water systems.
Correct.
We are on the verge of needing an operator to come and run this little well just for this building.
Yeah.
And we are on the verge of needing that for 3 others. So
Public water, because basically these are all now.
why not just
public-
declare ourselves the public water system?
Well, you are though.
It's an
That's the thing. This is a little bit of nuance and semantics, but this is a public water system. There is a well
Yeah.
on this property which serves the public and has to meet public water. This is community water standards.
So do we have a compliance issue?
Not at present. We have an operational compliance, long-term operational compliance issue. This building is subject to disinfection requirements because our septic doesn't meet the required setback distance.
Oh,
So the
ultraviolet.
Department of Health, how are they handling it?
They've asked us to install disinfection.
Or an operator. Do we have to worry about an operator yet?
Certain types of disinfection require, if you do, for instance, chlorination,
So you're on the verge of having to really.
Yeah,
you need an operator. If you do UV disinfection, you need, in this case, 6 redundant systems because one well serves 3 buildings. Each building requires a redundant system. So you don't need
The logic
a
is
licensed
starting,
operator for
Here's the
that, but you
kickstart.
need somebody needs to observe that every single day. That person doesn't have to have a license
Oh, okay.
for UV. But you still have to fill out your monthly reports. You have to monitor the system every day. And so now you magnify,
What's the testing requirement on
the
that?
health department gives us the testing.
30, like a 30-day?
Bacteria?
Quarterly testing?
Right now, bacteria is once a month,
Well,
yeah. Right.
so
okay, so, but when the MCL on nitrogen drops to 4?
PFAS is 10 to 4, not nitrogen.
Yeah, not honey.
Oh, yeah, nitrogen's still 11.
sorry.
10.
That's all right.
So there would have to be some kind of financial breakdown. How much is it going to cost you to run the main line?
It's not $2 million.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
And, you know, about the financial justification.
But you see the tide turning in terms of
right.
burden on the township to operate, when you say $2 million and we look at the total water use here, it's not a lot of water use, but regardless of how much it is, you're still going to have to pay somebody to come and check the chlorination system, so then you're saying, well, now I'm paying the guy to come and run the system at town hall. Then he's going to go across the street and he's going
Right.
to do it at the school. Then if the school does their own IA system, he's going to stop by, assuming he has a sewer license also, and he's going to do their sewer testing there. And then he's going to also go over to the library and do it. I mean, he could have made one stop over at Sagem's Wood and done all this
Correct.
together. That's not the place where we're at now, but that's the place where we're
That's heading.
heading to.
That's a good point.
And, Mega's made a really strong point about long-term planning of water supply and septic. This is a great example. Do you pay for chlorination systems, operators, UV systems And then it turns out you don't use this building in 5 years for how it's used today. Do you spend $100,000 to put an IA system in the parking lot? And then in 10 years, you need to move it, you know? Those are the types of problems you avoid or eliminate if you're talking about any sort of centralized system. If the water supply comes from a pipe in the street, it doesn't matter how you arrange the parcel. If the wastewater goes into a pipe in the street, it doesn't matter how you rearrange the parcel. And the same thing with use. You can increase the use, you could have a larger town meeting room, or you could decrease it. It's okay.
So what do you see as a timeline where it's going to be critical?
Oh,
Because right now you're floating,
Oh, we're in it already.
floating, you're in it.
We're in it already. You know,
The
this,
demand for an operator is on the horizon.
we're at that crossroad now where at town hall specifically, the health department has said, how you gonna address this? And we have to come to them and answer, how are we going to address this? Are we going to spend $50,000 to do UV treatment? Are we going to spend, I don't know how much chlorination system costs, but make a commitment to having a licensed operator?
these could be individual,
Putting out small fires. one
these are
after another.
individual systems.
You know, I don't know. This is actually precisely the problem that happened at the Presbyterian Church.
These are little mini Presbyterians.
And you know, by extension, that's a town building because we are the occupants.
Baseball. That's right.
But this is also at West Neck, that's what got us to where we were. We got, because we didn't have an operator
Right, so the Presbyterian Church is a singular well that started to become non-compliant with meeting MCL. And so we had to rectify it. It was a very expensive filtration system. It requires daily visits, monthly reporting, monthly and quarterly testing, and it's very expensive.
And storage, if we're.
And storage of filtration byproduct. It's the most expensive water on Shelter Island by a long shot.
Yes.
And that's a great example.
We're pretty expensive.
Will continue to happen at these, you know, public facilities because they are public water systems.
So again, I think we're all in agreement that the time is now to begin to educate people that they want public water supply in the center. And we know that the whole system will be demand driven in the end. So we need to create that demand, and that demand comes from people knowing that they have non-potable water and that they don't have to live that. And it impacts their property value. When they go to sell their house, they have non-potable water.
So to expand on Andrew's point, you don't have to have a potability problem. You have a compliance problem in another fashion, just simply because of the service you provide. The library is a public water system. Whether it meets potability limits or not, the answer then is how much is your treatment? Are you doing extensive filtration there? You still have the operator compliance, or you still have the compliance obligation of a public supply.
The interesting thing to me is in all the discussions we've had of talking about where this stuff goes, it goes down. All the flushing and so forth that we have, I always had a thought that was more at the surface level. And so it was the wells and so forth drawing it. We're relatively in good shape. But if all the effluent that we're flushing, even with AI and whatever remains in the contaminant area, was down and then out, basically you're talking we're talking a lot of time to be able to kind of clean up the aquifer, if ever, with that kind of an approach.
So again, I think that things went very well. Look, it's now 4:00.
Yeah.
I know.
Everybody needs to give up.
You know what it is? It's next steps. It's solid steps.
Yep.
So that's, I think, what,
Yep, well, we'll get these guys a citizen science program going. We will,
I can see a memorandum.
yes.
And I can see a memorandum going to the town board with anecdotal information, with water quality test information, such as it is, and such as it could be, nitrogen strips and so forth in the neighborhood, okay? The issues that you just raised around the difficulty of running these 3 or 4 different public water supply systems, not because they're huge, but because they serve the public in public buildings. And all of the compliance and regulatory reporting licensed operator and so forth requirements of all that. Say, look, that's where that's what we're dealing with right now. Okay. What is a reasonable way to solve this? It is a public water supply system in the town. This is what it would cost, and lay that out. And go to the town board and say, look, you want us to further develop this?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
On the heels of yesterday's meeting, I'm not excited about that one, but I agree with you, Andrew.
Okay, sure.
okay.
And again, we're gonna go through, you know, it's a series of steps. We're gonna protect that water zone.
Questions from the audience before we move?
Yeah, sorry, questions from the audience? My apologies. Anybody? I think that we've killed the audience.
Informational.
Actually, motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, that's all right, and then we're on again Monday, right?